IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. My name is Shambhavi Naik. Today we're going to be talking about a potential public health crisis, something that has been looming over us for a while, and something that is not COVID-19. COVID-19 seems to have raised a huge awareness on the fact that our public health systems are weak, and that India needs to take more strides to improve public health. But public health is not just about healthcare. It's not about making sure that people have access to healthcare. It is about increasing overall health of the public. And one of the primary goals of improving a public health system is to make sure that sanitation systems are in place. A single gram of feces contains millions of pathogens and contributes to nearly 100,000 deaths of children under 5 years in India. Sick children, because they're not able to eat properly, because they're not able to absorb nutrition properly, can actually die through malnutrition, stunned growth, and opportunistic infections. As a result, India has embarked on the project to become open-defecation free, to improve sanitation access to Indian citizens. And we were declared open-defecation free on 2nd October 2019. But are we really? There has been a recent report that the WHO and UNICEF has come out with reporting on the state of worst sanitation. What are the findings of this report? What are the implications for India? To discuss this report with me and its findings and its implications for India, I have Sunila Dixit, who is a public health researcher at the Takshashila Institution. Hi, Sunila.
Hi, Shambhavi. First of all, I completely agree with you about what you said regarding public health systems. So it's not just about access to healthcare facilities, right? It also refers to other aspects such as having safe sanitation systems, access to clean drinking water. And India has been making strides since the past couple of years in the areas of sanitation. And recently, as you mentioned, the WHO came out with this report on the worldwide status of sanitation. And WHO makes a case for why sanitation is a public good. In the report, it mentions that, sanitation provides benefits across society in improved health as well as economic and social development. And it's not news that lack of safe sanitation can lead to illnesses and diseases that disproportionately affect children, as you said before, including diarrhea, worm infections, and stunting. But it's not just children, okay? Poor sanitation affects everyone, and a polluted environment impacts the entire community, whether or not an individual household has a sanitation facility. And in addition to hard to quantify effects on dignity, safety, and gender equality, there are also significant financial costs related to lack of sanitation, including increased healthcare costs, lost income, foregone educational opportunities, and costs resulting from pollution. So poor sanitation disproportionately affects the most vulnerable and disadvantaged populations, particularly women and people living with disabilities. So WHO makes a case for sanitation as a public good and urges for the governments to completely involve themselves in this matter and look to it that all the people have access to safe sanitation.
So, when you speak about safe sanitation, right, what does it mean? Because it is not just about toilets, right? The infrastructure is more than that. The idea that people will use the toilet is obviously more expensive than just building infrastructure. So what is included in safe sanitation?
Yes. So safe sanitation means that, the excreta that of the human beings, it is not being cleaned up by other people. Safe sanitation means there are proper treatment facilities in place that, carry those waste material from the toilets to a proper treatment system. So, as you know, in the past, and there are still cases of people being used as manual scavengers in India. So that is not at all safe sanitation. And it's not just about building infrastructure, as you said. Even if you have the infrastructure, there has to be water supply so that people can actually use those toilets. And sometimes, even if there's water supply and proper toilets in place, it's just the mindset of people. Like, I had heard of a story where women in a remote village of Rajasthan, they used to go for open defecation in the fields early in the morning. And when an NGO thought of solving this problem for them, they built toilets for them, but the women were not ready to use those toilets. And the reason was that going to fields early in the morning was the only time they got to interact with other women, because since they belong to conservative families, it was hard for them to get out of their homes other than that for particular reasons. So we have cases like that in India where, it's not just about building infrastructures, but it's also about behavioral change as well.
I remember that story. We had discussed this in our GCPP HLS cohort, right? We had done this as a case study to see how policy needs to go hand in hand with culture and traditions.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah, and I can also attest to that. I mean, anyone who's traveled by Mumbai local trains early in the morning to get to work or get to college will see the same people every day using the railway lines as an open toilet, right? So getting that
Yeah.
behavioral change is more difficult than just building the infrastructure. But how does sanitation actually, so if it's a public good, and we've all agreed to getting the sustainable development goals achieved, how does sanitation fit into that picture of a sustainable development of the world?
Yes. So the Sustainable Development Goals that have been set for 2030, there are 4 goals that actually relate to universal sanitation. The main SDG that relates to it is the goal number 6, which is clean water and sanitation. So it refers to achieving access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all and end open defecation by 2030, and it involves paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. Other than the goal number 6, there's also goal number 1, which is no poverty. And it refers to ensuring all men and women, in particular the poor and vulnerable, they have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to basic services, which includes sanitation. And the particular target under the goal number 1 is populations should have access to basic services such as drinking water, sanitation, and basic hand washing facilities. And other 2 goals are achieving universal health coverage, which includes healthcare facilities having basic water, sanitation, and hygiene services. And the last goal is quality education, which includes all schools, they should have access to wash facilities. So these are the sustainable development goals which we are looking at when we talk about achieving universal sanitation.
Okay, great. So I guess we can cut to the chase now. What were the findings of this report? Are we on our way? Are we lagging behind? How is the world doing when it comes to sanitation?
Yeah, so the findings are actually disheartening if you look at it. The report specifically states that despite the progress that has been taking place, 2 billion people across the world, they still lack even a basic level of sanitation service. And according to the rate of progress that is taking place, it will need to be quadrupled if we are to achieve the sustainable development goals by 2030. So 4 times the speed that is taking place right now. So which is a lot. And the other findings are that the report states that while 30 countries are on track to achieve open defecation free status, which includes India also, by the way, progress is too slow in 30 other countries, and in 10, open defecation is actually increasing as the population grows. The 30 other countries that they talk about where the progress is too slow include most of the countries in sub-Saharan African and Central and South Asia. And when it comes to schools, 19% of schools worldwide were estimated to have no services at all for sanitation in 2019. An estimated 367 million children attend a school in which there is no sanitation facilities. And over half of these children live in two WHO regions, Sub-Saharan Africa and Central and Southern Asia. So, achieving universal access to basic sanitation services in schools by 2030 will require a five-fold increase in the current rate of progress. Also, for healthcare facilities, it is concerning that the WHO doesn't have data because the countries don't report data on sanitation facilities in healthcare institutions. So the lack of data on sanitation means that the actual situation is likely much worse than the available figures suggest. So the figures are quite concerning as of now.
Okay, well, that's a lot to unpack. And that number you said about the schools and the children who don't have access is strikingly high. So let's see. What are the other factors that play a role in access to sanitation? Right. So we spoke about schools. Obviously, there's economic reasons for why someone might not have access. There might be geopolitical reasons, right? Refugees or people who have been displaced might not get access. So what are the other factors that have been confounding these findings?
Yeah. So the case of refugees is a concerning one because you know how the condition of refugee camps is. Like, people are crammed into small spaces. So it's very difficult to actually provide safe sanitation services to them. And other thing is that there is no accountability for those services. Like, most of the people who live in refugee camps are accounted for. But what about the refugees who don't get into these camps and just try to find their own way of making a living? So those people are not even considered. So it's really difficult to actually provide safe sanitation services to all of the refugees across the world. And the report actually states that according to the data from 175 of the refugee sites in September 2020, only 32% of the households at the sites used basic sanitation services. So 32% is a very small number. And there are considerable practical challenges when it comes to providing sanitation services in camps and settlements. And the obvious challenge is the lack of sufficient space for installing household facilities. So that is one of those challenges. And another, leaving this aside refugees and forcibly displaced people, there's this challenge of bridging the gap between poor and the rich. So there is considerable disparity when it comes to access to sanitation facilities between the rich and poor. So there are a lot of social and geopolitical factors that need to be considered when we are talking about sanitation.
Right. So there's obviously the quantity and access is one part. The quality is the other part. Do we actually is the sanitation safe? Is it clean? Can people use it without fear, right? So of illness and other factors. So there's a lot going on there. And that brings us to India. How is India really faring? We have been supposed to have been open defecation free last year. Are there any updates on that? What does it mean to be open defecation free? What are the parameters?
Yeah. So if you actually access the website of Swachh Bharat Mission, you will see that the whole of India's map is green, which means that whole of India is open defecation free. And the parameters that they use for declaring a village open defecation free is that all of the population in that village has access to toilets, and there is no presence of unhygienic or unsafe toilet in any household in the village, and toilet is used by all of the household members, and all the schools and anganwadis, they have access to toilets, and there is no presence of visible fecal matter in the village. So these are the parameters that they use to declare a village open defecation free. However, according to a national annual rural sanitation survey, the data that they have presented is in contrast with the declaration of Swachh Bharat Mission. So, according to that survey, they found that several households continue to have unhygienic toilets in villages that had been already declared as open defecation free. For example, in Odisha, 27.8% of the households, they did not have access to toilets. And in Jammu Kashmir, 14.7% of households did not have access. The survey also found that almost 24% of households which had been declared open defecation free did not use safe methods to dispose of child feces. That is, they were neither burying it nor putting it in a toilet. The survey also found visible feces in areas that had been used for open defecation in the past in 7% of the ODF villages. So these findings are in contrast of the declaration by the Swachh Bharat Mission. So clearly, we still need to do a lot more before actually declaring those villages open defecation free. And the problem doesn't end by just building toilets, as we discussed before, right? Even if the toilets are built, there are people who are not using it actually. So that doesn't solve the problem of open defecation.
Right. So I think what you're saying is that we have made improvement, we have made progress. We have built the infrastructure. Now retaining it, keeping it working, maintaining it, and making sure people use it is probably the second phase for us to reach and maintain that goal of being open defecation free, right?
Right.
Are there any recommendations that the report gives on how this can be achieved?
Yes. So lot of them actually have to do with what the government needs to do. So according to the report, a majority of the countries, they have national policies and plans for sanitation, but few actually have adequate human and financial resources to implement those policies. So they have, the report has actually come up with lot of policy solutions that governments can adopt. So the first is, of course, good governance, and it begins with leadership, effective coordination, and regulation. Experience shows this can be from head of a state, minister, or another senior political figure ready to assume the challenge of driving progress. Local leadership is also equally important. States, districts, or villages, they must have a clear vision, roadmap, and targets endorsed, promoted, and followed up on by a prominent champion. I mean, what I just said now can actually be seen in India. I mean, Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually has, pioneered this Swachh Bharat mission, and people associate him with that mission. So I guess India is following the right footsteps when it comes to this. And the report also states that sanitation needs to be defined as an essential service for which government is responsible and can be held accountable. So whatever progress has been made till now, it needs to be made public, and whatever funds are being used for it, where are the funds coming from, that also needs to be made public so that people know that the government is actually doing something for the sanitation services. That is there. And the other solution that the report states is smart public finance. According to the current status, it is households and not governments that currently provide the largest proportion of funding for sanitation through connection tariffs, emptying service fees, and investment in toilets. So it is like out-of-pocket expenditure. When we talk about out-of-pocket expenditure for health, it is similar to that. So people actually put money from their own pockets for building toilets. And I'm not talking about just India, it's across the world, according to the report. So the WHO encourages governments to find funding sources for sanitation because it is a public good. So they talk about 3 T's here. First T is taxes disbursed via government budgets. Second T is transfers from external donors. And third T is tariffs and user fees. And they also encourage public-private partnerships. And a common form of public-private partnership that they have talked about is a concession contract for operation and management of waste treatment plants. So governments seeking to support private sector investment in sanitation must develop robust regulatory environment, enabling the private sector to generate reliable and sufficient revenue streams to cover their investments and operations. And governments must also build capacity in commercial and financial management and contract work. So what it's suggesting is that government has to play a majority of role in providing the sanitation facilities, but it also has to involve private sector as well, especially in countries like India, which has a huge population to cater to. But the private sector should also have some incentives to actually contribute to this.
That reminds me, a lot of the SBM was actually had a lot of foot soldiers, right? We had the Swachhagrahis.
Yeah, yes.
Who were kind of pivotal in the role of getting around customer change. So this cannot only be about government building toilets. It has to be a community level exercise involving everybody to make sure that India becomes open defecation free.
Definitely. So multiple stakeholders are involved in this and should be involved in this because, it's just not the government. Community also has to participate because at local level, people trust the community more and they listen to what the head of the community has to say. So it's more likely that people will follow safe sanitation ways once the head of the community tells them to, tells them the benefits of doing so.
Right. And let's just hope that this is not again the ASHA worker whom we have really, really abused in the past 11 months, and poor thing has been doing everything at the community level. So let's hope that we recognize that this is a different role. It's part of the public health functions, obviously, but we cannot have more burden put on the ASHA worker, and then the role for someone to steer the community towards becoming open defecation free is recognized and rewarded. So thank you, Sunila. It seems that as far as becoming open defecation free goes, you're not there yet, but we are making progress. We seem to be on the right track. And let's hope that things stay this way and we do actually achieve and maintain that status soon. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks, Sunila. And do keep listening in to All Things Policy.
Thanks, Shambhavi.
Please consider signing up for Takshashila's courses. Applications are now open and you can apply at www.takshashila.org.in/courses. If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Another fun week in the books last week, and I think you guys should definitely check out some of the shows that we did. So first, let me tell you about Cock and Bull. We did 2 Cock and Bulls on Cyrus Says last week, which is, I don't think we've ever done before. But there was just so much to talk about, and it was fun. The first one was just on Trish, myself, and Cyrus. The second one, we had Abhijit Ganguly on, and that was a great episode. Do check that out. Check out Know Your Kanun as well. It's been a while since I spoke about that show, but Amber's been doing a great job on it. This week he spoke to Naina Sharma, a Canadian lawyer, about the ways that you do business in Canada and the challenges that presents. Definitely very interesting stuff. Do check that out. The guys at Naan Curry are doing some really, really fun stuff. Do check out their latest episode. They talk about roti, the simple bread, but it's got some complications to it. Let them tell you about what they are. Do check that out. Also, do definitely check out the Wire Talks with Siddharth Bhatia. He's been killing it, man. It's just a news show, but what great conversations. This week, he had Siddharth Singh on to talk about pollution. Do check that out. And you know what, guys? The best news of all, Simplified is back. They've been back for a few weeks and I haven't called them out before, but remember that they're back and do check them out. This week, they talk about, does censorship make sense? Knowing the guys, I think I know the answer to that, but you should go check that out. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Hi guys, this is Ayushi.
And I am Ritasha.
And welcome to Agla Station Adulthood.
It's a fun podcast we've got going on and we'd love for you to tune in and enjoy with us.
Join us as we stop at various stations and discuss different topics that seem to be bothering us and hopefully
Dating,
you as well.
relationships, beauty, just being an adult, lots of different things.
We don't have a great grip on it, but we've done okay so far.
Catch Agla Station Adulthood every Thursday on the IVM app, the IVM website, or wherever else you get your podcasts.